It happened on a Thursday night, live in front of millions. The set was glowing, the audience was buzzing, and the guests were stacked, a blockbuster lineup meant to light up primetime. Center stage was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, towering, confident, charming as ever. He had just finished a string of summer hits and was in peak form, riding the wave of success that came naturally to him. Sitting 2 seats down was Tom Holland, young, fresh-faced, modest in posture but sharp in spirit. He'd been in a few films, done some stunts, impressed a few casting agents, but at that point, he was still the kid from that Netflix thing, or the guy who might be the next something. He wasn't yet a name you built a poster around. The host, always eager for friendly tension, brought it up. "So Tom," he said with a grin, "you've got some big shoes to fill in this industry. Any advice from the champ?" He nodded toward Dwayne. Laughter from the crowd. A quick pan to Johnson, who smiled wide then leaned forward with a glint in his eye that was just a shade too sharp. "I mean, look," Dwayne said, voice booming through the studio, "he's a good kid, got energy, but let's be real. Hollywood's not school theater. It's not about looking cute and doing backflips. It's about presence. You either walk on set and command the room, or you don't. No offense, Tom, but there's a difference between playing Spider-Boy and being Spider-Man, you know what I mean." The crowd laughed. The host chuckled, nervously. Even Tom smiled a small, polite grin that looked tighter the longer the camera stayed on him. Dwayne leaned back, pleased with the crowd's reaction, thinking it was all good fun. But behind Tom's eyes, something registered. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Just that quiet, steady note people carry when they decide, without saying a word, that they're going to remember everything. Tom didn't respond. Not in the moment. He nodded lightly, let the laugh pass over him, and turned back to the host with a comment about loving what he did. The segment rolled on. The audience moved on. But something shifted in the air, the kind of shift that only matters years later. After the show, headlines ran with the joke. Clips spread fast. "The Rock roasts Spider-Boy. Tom Holland gets a lesson in star power." It wasn't malicious, not really, but it was dismissive. Like the world had decided who Tom Holland was before he had a chance to show them anything else. For a while, Tom did what most young actors would do. He smiled through interviews. He played supporting roles. He took whatever came next, even if it wasn't what he deserved. But privately, he trained harder. Took voice work seriously. Worked with acting coaches on roles no one even saw. He studied body language. Read scripts cover to cover twice. He paid attention. Not to fame, not to fans, but to craft. Because he knew something Dwayne Johnson didn't: presence wasn't just volume. It was precision. It was how a moment sat in silence after a single line, then came the audition. It wasn't supposed to be his. The studio had a short list of bigger names. But when Tom walked into that room, he didn't act. He didn't pose. He embodied something. He became it. Spider-Man, not the character with a costume, but the boy behind the mask. Awkward, smart, unsure, brave. Not someone trying to be larger than life, someone trying to live. The callback came fast. The contract followed. And just like that, Tom Holland, the same kid who once got chuckled at on national television, was now leading one of the biggest franchises in film history. Not only that, but the payday that came with it was record-breaking. Not just for a first-time superhero lead for any actor his age. People blinked when the number leaked. Agents recalculated. Critics rewatched. Suddenly, the joke from that Thursday night didn't age well, but Tom didn't gloat. Not publicly. Not then. He did something better. He waited, because eventually, that same talk show came calling again, and this time, the seats were switched, the chairs were the same. The backdrop hadn't changed. Even the host was still grinning with that same "let's stir something" energy he always had. But everything else, everything that mattered, was different. Tom Holland wasn't the kid anymore. He was the headliner. The box office draw. The actor who had just closed a billion-dollar trilogy with a performance critics called the emotional spine of a generation. And the moment he stepped onto that soundstage, it was clear to everyone, the boy who once sat 2 seats down was now the man in the middle. The host introduced him with enthusiasm. "You know him from just about everything, now give it up for Tom Holland." The applause was thunderous, not polite. The kind of sound reserved for someone who earned it slowly and thoroughly. Tom took his seat, calm, dressed in black, no nerves, no over-gesturing. Just stillness. Confidence in stillness. That's what he'd learned in the years since. They joked. Talked about the film. Shared a few behind-the-scenes stories. Then, like a trained conductor, the host leaned back and said, almost casually, "So, I think the last time you were here, someone made a little comment about Spider-Boy, didn't they?" The audience chuckled. Tom raised his eyebrows, pretending to think. "Did they?" he said, playing it cool. That rings a bell." And right on cue, like a twist scripted in the stars, the side curtain pulled back. And out walked Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Same grin. Same walk. But even he looked surprised by the cheers Tom had just pulled. He waved, clapped Tom on the shoulder, and took the seat beside him. The couch felt tighter now. Not physically, but emotionally. There was tension, but not the dangerous kind. The kind that builds when 2 people both know something important is about to happen, but only one of them has rehearsed their line. The host, loving every second, leaned forward. "So, Dwayne, you remember what you said about our friend Tom here last time?" Dwayne smiled. "I mean, I might have said something. Maybe gave the young blood a little tough love." The audience laughed. Dwayne turned to Tom. "I was just trying to fire you up, man. You know how I do." Tom nodded slowly. "Sure. That's fair. But you know," he said, voice light, tone even, "you said something that stuck with me." Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "Did I?" Tom leaned in slightly, enough for the cameras to lock in. "You said there's a difference between Spider-Boy and Spider-Man. And you were right." Pause. "Because after that night, I spent a lot of time figuring out which one I wanted to be." The crowd hushed. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't a clap back. It was sharper than that, respectful, surgical. "I worked. A lot. And when No Way Home dropped, I became the youngest actor to ever earn that kind of paycheck on a single film. Not because I shouted the loudest or hit the gym the hardest, but because I didn't let one moment define me. I let it drive me." The silence held. The audience froze. Dwayne stared at him, no smirk now. Just thought. The host gave an awkward laugh. "Wow, okay, we're going there." But no one was laughing. Tom sat back, folded his hands, and looked over, not with hostility, but with the calm of someone who had already made peace with what was and had built something better because of it. Dwayne nodded once. Then twice. He turned to the audience, then back to Tom. "I gotta say something, and I mean it." His voice dropped. "I was wrong. Dead wrong. I looked at you back then and saw a kid. I didn't see the work behind the smile. That's on me. You didn't just prove me wrong, Tom. You redefined what a leading man can look like. And I'm sorry for disrespecting that when I should have encouraged it." The apology hit hard, not because of its size, but because of who said it. The Rock wasn't known for stepping back. But here he was, giving space. Owning his words. And Tom, to his credit, didn't milk the moment. He smiled, reached out his hand, and the two shook, not the forced kind, not staged real. The audience erupted, not for the clash, but for the closure. That night, the moment trended. The clip was everywhere. Tom Holland's classy comeback. The Rock owns his mistake. Spider-Boy grows all the way up. But Tom didn't post about it. He didn't quote it. He didn't reference it again. Because he'd already said what he needed to. Not to prove anything, just to close the loop. Backstage, Dwayne stopped Tom before he left. "Seriously," he said, "that was powerful. I respect the hell out of how you handled all of this." Tom smiled. "I learned from the best," he said. Then added, just barely loud enough for Dwayne to hear, even if they didn't know they were teaching. And with that, he walked away. The kid who didn't clap back became the man who didn't need to, because the truth had already spoken and it didn't need a microphone. The show ended, but the story didn't. People shared the moment across timelines and headlines, turning a short exchange into a cultural pulse. Commentators praised Tom's composure, his restraint, his ability to deliver a message without ever raising his voice. Others praised Dwayne for owning his words, for showing that power didn't always mean standing tall, sometimes it meant stepping back. But for both of them, what mattered most didn't happen online. It happened 2 days later, in a quiet studio lot in Burbank. No cameras, no audience. Dwayne had reached out through a mutual contact. Not for PR. Not to smooth over image. Just to talk. Tom agreed. They met in a small private office next to an editing suite where Dwayne was reviewing footage for a new project. He offered Tom a bottle of water, then sat down across from him. No entourage. No assistant. Just 2 actors with nothing rehearsed between them. "You know," Dwayne started, voice lower than usual, "when I was younger, guys used to treat me like a punchline too. Said I'd never be more than a muscle act. Said I should stick to wrestling and commercials. It ate at me more than I let on. And somewhere along the way, I guess I started doing the same to guys coming up behind me." Tom didn't interrupt. He just listened. Dwayne went on. "The night I said what I said on that couch, I didn't mean to be cruel. I thought it was funny. Light. But I see now how easy it is to mistake a kid's confidence for arrogance. And how fast we forget that every one of us started somewhere." Tom nodded slowly. "I didn't take it personally," he said. "But I remembered it. Not because of the words, but because of the moment. It taught me something." Dwayne looked over, curious. "Taught you what?" Tom leaned back slightly. "That no one else gets to define what you grow into unless you let them." That line stayed in the air for a few seconds longer than usual. Dwayne smiled. Not his showbiz smile. Something quieter. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, man. I mean that." Tom grinned. "Well, not according to Twitter." Dwayne laughed. "Twitter doesn't know what it wants. You do. That's rare." They talked for another hour, not about movies or money, but about pressure, about family, about the strange burden of being watched before you've figured yourself out. Tom admitted there were nights early on when he'd almost given up the Spider-Man role. The weight felt bigger than he was. But something inside him kept saying, "Prove it. Just once, prove it." Dwayne shared his own doubts. The years he tried to transition into serious roles, the Times producers said, "You're too big for this part," literally. The two found more common ground than either expected. Not just in success, but in how hard they had both worked to hold on to self when the world kept trying to hand them a mask. Before Tom left, Dwayne stood up and said something simple. "If you ever need anything, not press, not clout, just someone who gets it, call me." Tom shook his hand. "Thanks. That means more now than it would have then." They didn't take a selfie. They didn't film a documentary. Just a handshake. A real one. The kind that says we're good now, even without saying it. Weeks later, at a fan convention, someone asked Tom during a Q&A what advice he had for young actors who felt underestimated. He smiled, leaned into the mic, and said, "Let them laugh. Let them doubt. Then let your work speak." The crowd cheered, but he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The line landed because it was lived, and when Dwayne saw the clip later that night, alone in his trailer, he didn't repost it. He didn't quote it. He just watched it twice. Then he smiled, shut his phone off, and got back to work, because real respect doesn't always start loud, sometimes it starts with a misstep, and ends with a nod. Tom Holland never needed revenge, that he never needed to prove Dwayne Johnson wrong, that he just needed time to prove himself right, and he did that on screen. On that couch. And everywhere in between. Years passed. Spider-Man closed its final arc. Tom stepped into new roles, some dramatic, some strange, all unexpected. And with each film, each quiet success, he moved further from the shadow of that old moment. Not because he ran from it, but because it no longer defined him. Dwayne continued building too. Bigger films. Bigger risks. And over time, his tone changed. Softer, less invincible, more aware. Every now and then, when asked about industry misjudgments, he'd drop a one-liner, "Ask Tom Holland." I learned that one the hard way. But Tom never echoed it back. Not in interviews. Not in press tours. Because he no longer needed to win the conversation. He already had something more lasting than applause, self-respect. And something deeper, peace. One day, at a small award ceremony in London, Tom received a low-key recognition for his contribution to youth theater programs. It wasn't televised. No tuxedo crowd. Just folding chairs, smiling teenagers, and parents trying not to cry. Afterward, a boy maybe 15 years old came up to him and asked, "Is it true someone once laughed at you on TV?" Tom smiled gently and said, "Yeah. And I'm glad they did." The boy blinked. Why? Tom looked at him, steady. Because I didn't need them to believe in me. I just needed to believe in myself. That night, as he walked home alone under the streetlights, no entourage, no flashbulbs, he thought about that couch. That laugh. That pause. And how everything after it, the work, the silence, the moment, had brought him here. No grudges. No regret, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd already said everything that needed saying, and the world had heard him. It was a film panel in New York, nothing fancy, no viral segments, just a roundtable of actors speaking to students about the craft. Not the business. Not the money. Just the work. Tom Holland sat near the end of the table, dressed down, sleeves rolled, sneakers scuffed from a morning walk through the city. He looked more like a student than a star. Across from him sat actors of all kinds, theater vets, rising names, a director or two. And then, stepping in last, just as the host was introducing the event, came Dwayne Johnson. There were no grand entrances. No cameras following him in. Just a handshake with the moderator and a polite nod to the rest of the panel. When he reached Tom, he stopped. No audience reaction yet. No script. He extended his hand. Tom stood, shook it firmly, then smiled. "Didn't think I'd see you here." Dwayne grinned. "Yeah, well. I figured if I'm gonna talk about growth, might as well sit next to someone who showed me what it actually looks like." The event started. They were asked about pressure, about public image, about how to hold on to identity in an industry that constantly reshapes people to fit screens. Most answered with philosophy. Some with humor. Tom answered with experience. "I used to think being underestimated was a disadvantage," he said. "Now I think it's a head start, because when no one sees you coming, you don't have to perform for anyone but yourself." The students scribbled that down like scripture. A few nodded slowly, like they weren't just hearing it, they were feeling it. Dwayne took his turn later. He spoke about learning to slow down. About listening. About realizing that loud wasn't always strong, and sometimes, the strongest man in the room was the one who let someone else speak first. Then he paused. Looked across the stage at Tom. "I misjudged him once," he said plainly. "And he showed me, without yelling, who he really was. I respect that more than any blockbuster I've ever made." There was no applause. Just quiet. The good kind. The kind that means something landed and doesn't need noise to prove it. After the panel, they found themselves backstage again, this time without tension. No apologies needed. No ego left to protect. Just two people who had walked opposite paths toward the same truth. Dwayne leaned on a table. "You know," he said, "if we had filmed that first couch moment today, it'd probably be a scripted redemption arc by now." Tom laughed. "Yeah, or a 6-part docuseries with dramatic lighting." They laughed together. "For real this time," then Dwayne added, "I'm glad it wasn't. I'm glad it was messy. Honest. Quiet. Because that's what made it real." Tom nodded. "You know what made it real for me?" Dwayne looked over. Tom tilted his head thoughtfully. "The fact that I never had to beat you. Just had to be me. And eventually, that was enough." That landed. The next day, a clip from the panel made its way online. Not one of the planned moments. Just a behind-the-scenes phone video where Tom and Dwayne walked out of the venue together, no security, no press, just two guys talking and smiling like old friends. The caption read, "Respect doesn't always begin with agreement. Sometimes it begins with a second chance." It didn't go viral overnight. But it did spread. Slowly. Quietly. Like the story itself. No one tried to turn it into a feud anymore. The narrative had changed not because someone demanded it, but because two people earned it. Tom went on to direct his first film that year. Dwayne signed on as executive producer. No announcement. No hype. Just a credit in small, white letters, with guidance from DJ. And if you stayed through the end credits, past the logos, past the music, you'd see one more line: "For anyone who's ever been underestimated, keep going." No names. No moment circled in red, just truth, because in the end, Tom Holland didn't need to win the spotlight that he redefined it, and Dwayne Johnson. He didn't lose anything that he just learned how to share the stage.